The sound of my bedroom door creaking open at 3:47 a.m. will haunt me until the day I die. I knew instantly something was wrong. After 32 years of marriage, you learn to recognize every sound your house makes in the darkness. This wasn't Joseph getting up for water. This wasn't the old floorboard settling. This was the deliberate, calculated movement of someone who shouldn't be there. My eyes adjusted to see a silhouette standing at the foot of our bed, motionless as a predator studying its prey. When lightning from the storm outside illuminated his face, my blood turned to ice. It was Roger, my adopted son, the boy I'd loved as my own for 6 years. But the look in his eyes wasn't love. It wasn't even human. My name is Gertrude Miller, and I'm 76 years old now. Everyone in River Creek, Michigan knows me as Miss G, the woman who adopted the boy from the orphanage. What they don't know is that the same motherly love that once filled my heart with such hope nearly got me killed that October night in 1994. Let me tell you how we got there, because sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones we invite into our homes with open arms. It was the flood of 1988 that changed everything. The Grand River had swollen beyond its banks, taking half the lower houses in River Creek with it. Standing on my porch watching families wade through murky water, carrying everything they owned, something shifted in my heart. Joseph and I had our 2 children, Paul 17 and Margaret 15. But I'd always wanted more. There are children who need us, I told Joseph that evening as we watched the news coverage. Children who don't have anyone. My husband was a man of few words, but when he looked at me over his coffee cup and nodded, I knew he understood. 3 weeks later, we walked into St. Clair Children's Home for the first time. The director, Miss Clements, was a rail-thin woman with the demeanor of someone who'd seen too much heartbreak. When I told her we wanted a child, others might overlook her eyebrows lifted slightly. Are you certain most families prefer younger children, infants, if possible? We want someone who needs a family, I insisted. Someone who's been waiting. That's when she told us about Roger. 9 years old, been with us since he was 5, intelligent boy, but... She paused, choosing her words carefully. He's had difficulties with placement. His mother died of a drug overdose. Father unknown. He's what we call hard to place. I found him in the courtyard, sitting alone under an oak tree with a worn copy of Treasure Island in his small hands. He was painfully thin, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that seemed far too old for his face. When Ms. Clements introduced us, he looked up without smiling, studying us with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Hello, Roger," I said, kneeling to his level. "I'm Mrs. Miller, and this is my husband, Mr. Miller." He said nothing, just continued staring. But something in those dark eyes called to my maternal instincts. Here was a child who'd been hurt, who needed love and stability. Here was someone I could save. "What's your book about?" I asked gently. "Pirates." He answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "People who take what isn't theirs." I should have listened more carefully to that answer. The adoption process took 4 months. Social worker visits, background checks, interviews. Roger came for weekend stays that gradually extended. He was polite but distant, eating meals in silence, staying in his assigned room unless called. Paul complained about sharing his space, but I promised it was temporary until we could fix up the back room. "There's something off about him, Mom," Margaret said one evening after Roger had been with us for a month. "He just watches everything, like he's cataloging our routines." I dismissed her concerns. "He's adjusting honey. You'd be cautious, too, if you'd been through what he has." But even I couldn't ignore the small incidents. Missing items that reappeared in strange places. My jewelry box moved from the dresser to under his bed. Scissors disappearing from the kitchen drawer, only to be found wrapped in his pillowcase. When confronted, Roger would look genuinely confused. "I didn't take anything. Maybe someone's playing tricks on us." His voice held such innocence that I believed him. I wanted to believe him. School presented challenges from the start. Roger was academically gifted, but socially isolated. Teachers reported that other children avoided him, though he never seemed to initiate conflicts. When he came home with torn clothes or scraped knees, he'd shrug off my questions. "Boys will be boys," Joseph would say. "He needs to learn to stand up for himself." But Miss Peterson, his fourth-grade teacher, called with a different perspective. "Mrs. Miller, I'm concerned about Roger's behavior. He doesn't react normally to teasing or conflict. Most children cry, get angry, or seek help. Roger just absorbs it. Then later, I'll find the other child's backpack destroyed or their lunch money missing." Are you suggesting Roger is stealing? I'm suggesting he may be retaliating in ways that are difficult to trace. I've been teaching for 23 years, and I've never seen a child quite like him. That evening, I searched Roger's room while he was in the bathroom. Hidden under his mattress, I found a small notebook filled with detailed observations about our family. Our schedules, our habits, our conversations. The handwriting was neat, methodical. Joseph comes home at 5:30 every day except Friday 6:15. Gertrude does laundry on Tuesdays. Leaves kitchen window unlocked when she hangs clothes. Margaret stays after school for choir practice Wednesdays. Paul sneaks out through his window to see girlfriend on weekends. My hands trembled as I read. This wasn't the behavior of a normal child adjusting to a new home. This was surveillance. "Roger," I called as he emerged from the bathroom. "Can you explain this notebook?" For the first time since he'd arrived, I saw emotion flicker across his face. Not guilt or embarrassment, but annoyance at being discovered. "I like to remember things," he said simply. "Is that wrong? This isn't remembering Roger. This is watching us like we're strangers you need to keep track of." He tilted his head, studying my expression with clinical interest. "Aren't you strangers? You took me in, but you don't know me, and I don't know you. Not really." The way he said it sent a chill through me. Here was a 9-year-old child speaking with the detachment of an adult discussing a business transaction. That night, I showed Joseph the notebook. My husband, who rarely showed strong emotion, went pale. "This isn't normal, Gert. Children don't think this way." "He's been through trauma, Joseph. Maybe this is how he copes, by trying to understand his environment. Or maybe he's planning something." I wanted to dismiss Joseph's concern, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the following weeks, I began noticing things I'd previously explained away. How Roger seemed to anticipate my movements, appearing in doorways just as I rounded corners. How he knew things about our routines that he shouldn't have been paying attention to. How his eyes followed me with an intensity that felt inappropriate for a child toward a parent. The first time I caught him watching me undress through the crack in our bedroom door, I thought it was accidental. Children are naturally curious about adult bodies after all. But when it happened again, and then again, I confronted him. "Roger, it's not appropriate to watch people when they're changing clothes." "I wasn't watching," he replied smoothly. "I was just walking by." "The door to your room is in the opposite direction." He shrugged. I got confused. But his eyes held no confusion. They held calculation. As Roger approached his 11th birthday, the incidents escalated. Money began disappearing from Joseph's wallet, from my purse, from the emergency fund we kept in the kitchen drawer. When we confronted him, Roger's denials became more elaborate, more convincing. "Maybe Paul took it. He's been asking for money for that girl he likes." "Why would you suggest your brother did something wrong? I'm just trying to help figure out what happened." The way he said it with such seeming sincerity almost made me believe him. But Paul's genuine shock when accused told the truth. Then came the night I woke to find Roger standing in our bedroom doorway at 2 a.m. perfectly still, just watching us sleep. My heart nearly stopped. "Roger, what's wrong, sweetheart?" "I had a bad dream," he whispered. "Can I sleep in here?" Every maternal instinct told me to comfort him, but something deeper warned me against allowing him into our bed. "Of course, honey. Let me get you some blankets for the floor." As I arranged a makeshift bed beside us, I noticed Roger wasn't trembling or showing any signs of distress. He settled onto the blankets with the satisfied expression of someone who'd achieved their objective. The next morning, he was gone before I woke, but the blankets were neatly folded and placed on my dresser. On top sat a note in his careful handwriting. "Thank you for taking care of me, Mom. I love watching you sleep. You look so peaceful." I stared at that note for a long time, my hands shaking. The words were affectionate, but the undertone felt wrong, possessive, hungry. When I showed Joseph, his face hardened. "That's it. We need professional help." Dr. Sarah Chen at the County Health Center agreed to see Roger after I explained our concerns. She was a kind woman in her 40s with the patient demeanor necessary for working with troubled children. After 3 sessions, she requested a meeting with Joseph and me. "Roger is an extremely intelligent child," she began carefully. "But he's also deeply manipulative. In our sessions, he demonstrates what I call performed emotion. He shows me what he thinks I want to see rather than genuine feelings." "What does that mean for our family?" Joseph asked. Children who've experienced severe early trauma sometimes develop survival mechanisms that can be problematic. Roger has learned to observe and mimic normal emotional responses without actually experiencing them. It's a form of emotional camouflage, but he can get better right with love and stability. Dr. Chen hesitated. "Mrs. Miller, I need to be direct with you. Roger shows signs of attachment disorder, but there are other concerning indicators. His complete lack of empathy, his predatory focus on your movements and routines, his sophisticated manipulation tactics, these aren't typical even for trauma survivors." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you may be dealing with something beyond what traditional therapy can address. Some children are born with fundamental differences in brain structure that no amount of love can fix." I refused to accept it. Roger was my son now, and I wouldn't give up on him. We increased the therapy sessions, implemented strict routines, showered him with even more attention and affection. For a while, it seemed to work. Roger became more affectionate, more communicative. He started calling me Mom instead of Mrs. Miller. Helped with household chores without being asked, even showed interest in family activities. I thought we'd turned a corner. I was so wrong. The first sign something was seriously amiss came when I found my neighbor's cat Whiskers in our backyard shed. The animal was tied up with rope, barely alive, with small cuts covering its body. Roger found me crying over the wounded animal. What happened?" he asked with what sounded like genuine concern. "Someone hurt Whiskers, someone cruel and sick." Roger's face showed appropriate shock and sympathy. "That's terrible. Who would do such a thing?" His performance was perfect. Too perfect. In the past, Roger's emotions had felt stilted, artificial. Now they seemed flawlessly genuine, which somehow made them more frightening. Mrs. Henderson next door was devastated about her cat. "I don't understand it," she sobbed. "Whiskers never leaves our yard. Someone had to have taken him." That night, I searched Roger's room again. Hidden behind his bookshelf, I found a journal filled with detailed entries about neighborhood animals. Locations of pet doors, feeding schedules, behavioral patterns. The final entry was dated 2 days before Whiskers was found. "The gray tabby from next door sleeps in the sun by their back door every afternoon from 2-4 p.m. Easy target." My hands shook as I read. This wasn't childish curiosity or even typical childhood cruelty. This was the methodical planning of a predator. When I confronted Roger with the journal, his facade cracked for just a moment. I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. Not guilt or shame, but annoyance at being caught. "I didn't hurt that cat," he said calmly. "I just like to observe animals. Is that wrong?" "This isn't observation, Roger. This is stalking. Maybe someone saw my notes and used them to hurt the cat. Maybe they wanted to make me look bad." The explanation was so elaborate, so calculated, that I almost believed it. Almost. But I'd seen that flash of truth in his eyes. That night, I tried to explain my concerns to Joseph. "There's something fundamentally wrong with him. It's not just trauma or adjustment issues. It's something deeper." "What are you suggesting?" "I think Dr. Chen was right. I think we're dealing with something we can't fix. Joseph was quiet for a long time. What do you want to do? I don't know. He's our son now. How do you give up on your child? Maybe some children can't be saved, Gert. Maybe love isn't always enough. Those words haunted me because deep down, I knew he was right. But admitting it felt like betraying everything I believed about motherhood, about unconditional love, about second chances. Roger's behavior became increasingly erratic as he entered adolescence. Growth spurts made him taller and stronger, but his emotional development seemed to be moving in the opposite direction. He started bringing home stray animals, cats, dogs, even a raccoon once, claiming he was rescuing them. But these animals would disappear after a few days, and Roger would shrug off questions about where they'd gone. Maybe they found their way home, he'd say with convincing sadness. I hope they're okay. But I'd seen him in the backyard shed late at night, heard sounds that made my stomach churn. When I tried to investigate, the shed was always empty, scrubbed clean, with an efficiency that suggested practice. School began reporting new problems. Roger's grades remained excellent, but teachers complained about his interactions with other students. He seemed to take pleasure in psychological torment, spreading rumors designed to cause maximum damage, asking seemingly innocent questions that revealed private information, manipulating social dynamics to isolate vulnerable classmates. He's like a student who understands every rule of social interaction, but doesn't feel any of the emotions that make those rules necessary, his guidance counselor told me. It's deeply unsettling. The theft escalated too. Not just small amounts from wallets, but significant sums from neighbors, from church collection plates, from the local grocery store where he'd started working part-time. He was never caught directly, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. When I found $800 in cash hidden in his room, money that matched the exact amount stolen from Mrs. Peterson's purse during a church social, I knew we'd reached a breaking point. Roger, where did this money come from? I've been saving my allowance and job money. This is $800. Your allowance is $20 a week, and you've been working for 2 months. He looked at me with those calculating eyes, then smiled. Mom, are you calling me a thief? The way he said Mom dripped with mock hurt, a performance designed to make me feel guilty for doubting him. But I was done being manipulated. I'm calling you someone who needs to explain where this money came from. Fine. His demeanor shifted instantly, the hurt child act dropping away like a discarded mask. I took it. From stupid people who leave their purses unattended. From a church that collects money from poor people to pay for a building. From a store that charges 3 times what things are worth. Is that what you wanted to hear? The casual way he admitted to theft, the complete lack of remorse, sent chills through me. Don't you feel bad about stealing from people who trusted you? Roger tilted his head, studying me like I was an interesting specimen. Should I? They made it easy. If they cared about their money, they'd be more careful. That's not how normal people think, Roger. Normal people are weak, he replied. They follow rules that don't benefit them because they're afraid of being judged. I'm not weak. That night, I called Dr. Chen. I think we need to consider residential treatment. What's changed? I told her about the theft, the animals, the complete lack of empathy. He's getting bigger and stronger, and I'm starting to feel unsafe in my own home. Mrs. Miller, I need to ask you a difficult question. Have you ever felt that Roger might be sexually fixated on you? The question hit me like a physical blow. Why would you ask that? Some of the behaviors you're describing, the surveillance, the boundary violations, the possessiveness, can indicate inappropriate sexual interest. Combined with his lack of empathy and need for control, I couldn't finish the conversation. But that night, I started paying attention to things I'd been unconsciously ignoring. How Roger found excuses to be in the bathroom when I was showering. How he always seemed to be in the kitchen when I was cooking dinner in my summer dresses. How his eyes lingered on parts of my body in ways that made me uncomfortable. The final incident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday in October. I was hanging laundry in the backyard when I felt eyes on me. Looking up, I saw Roger watching from his bedroom window. But when our eyes met, instead of looking away in embarrassment, like a normal teenager caught staring, he smiled and waved. That evening, I found a note slipped under my bedroom door. "Dear Mom, I've been thinking about how beautiful you are. I know it's wrong, but I can't stop watching you. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like if Dad wasn't here and it was just us. I love you in a way that's probably not normal, but I can't help how I feel. Your devoted son, Roger." I sat on my bed, staring at that note until the words blurred. This wasn't a confused adolescent struggling with normal sexual development. This was a predator who'd been gradually escalating his behavior, testing boundaries, preparing for something I didn't want to imagine. I showed the note to Joseph, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw genuine fear in my husband's eyes. "We have to get him out of this house," Joseph said. "Tonight." "Where will he go?" "I don't care. A hospital, a treatment facility, back to the state, somewhere that isn't here." But when we went to Roger's room to confront him, he was gone. His window was open screen removed. On his pillow lay another note. "I know what you're thinking. I know you want to send me away, but I'm not going anywhere. This is my family now, and families stay together. I'll be back when you've had time to think about what's really important." We called the police, but Roger was 15 now, and runaways weren't considered high priority unless there was evidence of immediate danger. We changed the locks, installed better security, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Roger had been studying our house for 6 years. He knew every weak point, every vulnerability. 3 days later, I found signs that someone had been in the house while we were at work. Nothing obvious. A window left slightly open, a chair moved a few inches, the kind of subtle changes designed to let me know he'd been there without providing proof for the police. The psychological warfare was sophisticated and effective. I stopped sleeping through the night, started seeing shadows that might have been Roger, or might have been my imagination. Joseph bought a gun, something he'd never considered before in 30 years of marriage. "This isn't how I wanted to live," he told me one evening as we sat in our living room with all the lights on, curtains drawn. "That boy has turned our home into a prison." On October 29th, Joseph had to leave early for work. A major shipment was coming to the grain elevator, and as supervisor, he needed to be there before his crew. I begged him not to go. "Take a sick day. Something feels wrong. Gert, we can't let him control our lives. I'll be back by noon." But I knew with cold certainty that Roger had been watching, waiting for exactly this opportunity. As Joseph's truck disappeared down our driveway, I felt like prey left alone in a hunter's territory. I spent the morning on edge, jumping at every sound. Around 10 a.m. I called Joseph at work. "Please come home. I think he's here." "Did you see him?" "No, but I just know. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But 20 minutes felt like hours. I locked myself in the bedroom, phone in hand, waiting for sounds that would confirm my fears. The house remained silent, but silence felt more ominous than noise. When Joseph returned, we searched the house together. Everything appeared normal until we reached the basement. There, scratched into the wooden support beam, was a message in Roger's handwriting. "Tonight, when he's asleep, we'll finally be alone." Joseph called the police immediately, but they couldn't do much beyond increasing patrols in our neighborhood. "Keep your doors locked. Don't go anywhere alone, and call us immediately if you see him," Officer Martinez advised. That evening, we debated staying at a hotel, but Joseph was adamant. "This is our home. We're not running anymore." We went to bed early, both of us exhausted from stress and lack of sleep. Joseph had his gun in the nightstand drawer. I had the phone on my side of the bed. We'd thought we were prepared. We weren't. I woke at 3:47 a.m. to the sound of our bedroom door opening. The storm that had been threatening all day was finally breaking, thunder masking any other sounds Roger might have made getting into the house. He stood at the foot of our bed, perfectly still, wearing only shorts. In the brief illumination from lightning, I could see he was physically aroused. His eyes held an expression I'd never seen before. Not the calculated coldness I'd grown accustomed to, but something hungrier, more primal. I tried to wake Joseph by nudging him gently, not wanting to startle Roger into action. But my husband was a deep sleeper, especially when exhausted. Roger began moving slowly around the bed toward my side. Each step was deliberate, predatory. When he reached my bedside, he leaned down and whispered in my ear, "I've been planning this for a long time, Mom. I know exactly how this is going to go." The way he said, "Mom," made my skin crawl. This wasn't the disturbed affection of a confused teenager. This was the calculated cruelty of someone who'd been fantasizing about this moment. I tried to scream, but Roger's hand clamped over my mouth before I could make a sound. His grip was surprisingly strong, the result of 6 years of growth and the physical development that had transformed him from a small, frightened boy into a young man capable of violence. "Don't wake Joseph," he whispered. "This doesn't have to involve him. This is just between us." I struggled, trying to break free, but Roger climbed onto the bed, using his weight to pin me down. The mattress shook with my movements, and finally, mercifully, Joseph began to stir. What?" my husband mumbled, still half asleep. Roger turned toward him, and in that moment of distraction, I managed to bite his hand hard enough to draw blood. He jerked back, cursing, and I screamed. "Joseph, help me." My husband sat up instantly, his eyes adjusting to see Roger crouched over me like an animal. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Joseph lunged across the bed with a roar of rage I'd never heard before. The two of them fell to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Roger was younger and more agile, but Joseph had 30 years of physical labor behind his strength. They rolled across the floor, knocking over furniture, fighting with desperate intensity. "Get out!" Joseph yelled to me. "Call the police!" But I was frozen, watching the two people I loved most in the world trying to destroy each other. In the darkness, punctuated by flashes of lightning, they looked like demons locked in mortal combat. Roger managed to get his hands around Joseph's throat. My husband's face turned red, then purple. I grabbed the bedside lamp and brought it down on the back of Roger's head with all my strength. He collapsed forward onto Joseph, blood streaming from his scalp. For a terrifying moment, I thought I'd killed him. Then he stirred, rolled off my husband, and looked up at me with an expression of pure hatred. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice eerily calm despite the blood running down his face. Joseph was gasping, trying to get his breath back. Roger stood slowly, swaying slightly from the head injury, but his eyes never left mine. "This isn't over," he said. "This is my family, my house, my mom, and I always get what I want." He walked to the bedroom window, opened it casually, and climbed out into the storm. Before disappearing, he turned back one last time. "I'll be seeing you soon, Mom." The police arrived 20 minutes later, but Roger was long gone. Officer Martinez took our statements while paramedics examined Joseph's neck injuries. "He's escalating," the officer told us grimly. "This kind of behavior typically gets worse, not better. You need to consider that he may not be satisfied with intimidation much longer." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying next time he might not settle for just scaring you." We spent the next 3 days at a hotel while police searched for Roger. When we finally returned home, it was to find evidence that he'd been back. This time, he'd left something that made my blood run cold. On my pillow lay a manila envelope. Inside were photographs, dozens of them taken over the course of months without my knowledge. Pictures of me sleeping, showering, changing clothes, cooking dinner. Some were taken from outside the house, others from within, proving he'd been secretly entering our home far longer than we'd realized. But the most disturbing photo was recent, taken during the attack. It showed me struggling beneath Roger Joseph, unconscious on the floor. Someone else had been in our bedroom that night, someone with a camera. At the bottom of the envelope was a note. "I have friends who understand me. We've been planning something special for our reunion. See you soon, Mom." The realization that Roger wasn't working alone changed everything. This wasn't a disturbed teenager acting impulsively. This was an organized predator, with accomplices someone who'd been methodically planning an assault on our family. Joseph made the decision I couldn't. "We're leaving, tonight. We'll stay with Paul in Detroit until this is resolved." But as we packed our bags, I found one more surprise waiting in my jewelry box. Wrapped in tissue paper was my grandmother's antique locket, the one that had been missing for 3 years. Inside, where my grandmother's photo used to be, was a picture of Roger as a child smiling innocently at the camera. On the back, in his careful handwriting, "Every family needs memories. I've been making some of our own." We drove to Detroit that night, leaving behind the home where we'd built our life together, where we'd raised our children, where we'd tried to save a boy who couldn't be saved. 3 weeks later, the call came. Roger had been found in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of River Creek, along with 2 older men who'd been using him for drug distribution. But the circumstances of their discovery revealed the true horror of what we'd been dealing with. Police had been called to investigate reports of animal cruelty. In the warehouse, they found evidence of systematic torture. Not just animals, but documentation suggesting they'd been escalating to human targets. Among the evidence were detailed plans for what they called home visits to families with teenage children. Our address was at the top of the list. Roger was hospitalized for drug overdose and malnutrition, then transferred to a secure psychiatric facility. The evaluation report made for difficult reading. Multiple diagnoses: antisocial personality disorder, sexual sadism disorder, substance abuse disorder. The psychiatrist's note was blunt. Patient shows no capacity for empathy, remorse, or rehabilitation. Recommend permanent institutionalization. But the most chilling discovery came when investigators searched the warehouse more thoroughly. Hidden in the walls, they found journals dating back to Roger's time at the orphanage. Page after page of detailed fantasies involving sexual violence, torture, and murder. The earliest entries were dated when he was just 8 years old. One passage written shortly after he'd come to live with us stood out. "The woman thinks she saved me, but she's just given me better hunting grounds. I'm going to enjoy teaching her what real family love looks like." Reading those words, I finally understood what Dr. Chen had been trying to tell me. Some children aren't born to be saved. Some are born to be predators, and no amount of love or therapy can change their fundamental nature. Joseph never recovered from the trauma. The strong, steady man I'd married became anxious, paranoid, unable to sleep through the night. He died of a heart attack 2 years later at the age of 57. I believe the stress of those final months with Roger killed him as surely as if he'd been shot. Our other children, Paul and Margaret, tried to be supportive, but they carried their own guilt. "We knew something was wrong," Margaret confessed at Joseph's funeral. "We should have said something sooner. It wouldn't have mattered." I told her. I wouldn't have listened. I was too determined to prove that love could fix anything. Roger has been institutionalized for nearly 30 years now. I receive updates from the facility occasionally. No improvement, no remorse, no recognition that his actions caused harm. The doctors say he spends his time reading and writing, creating elaborate fantasy worlds that they're afraid to examine too closely. Once a year, on the anniversary of that October night, I receive a letter from him. Always the same message. "I still think about our family, Mom. I hope you think about me too. Love, your devoted son." I used to burn those letters immediately. Now I keep them not out of any remaining affection, but as a reminder of how dangerous unconditional love can be when it blinds us to evil. I'm 76 years old now, and I've spent the last 3 decades trying to understand how I failed so completely. How I missed the signs that were so obvious once I knew what to look for. How I put my own need to be a savior above the safety of my family. 5 years ago, I started a support group for families dealing with children who can't be helped by conventional means. We meet twice a month in the basement of River Creek Methodist Church. There are more of us than you might think. Parents who've discovered that sometimes the greatest act of love is admitting when love isn't enough. We share our stories, our guilt, our hard-won wisdom. We talk about the children we couldn't save and the families we needed to protect. We remind each other that not every broken thing can be fixed, and that recognizing this isn't a failure of love, it's a necessity for survival. If you're listening to this story and recognizing elements of your own situation, please understand you are not alone and you are not responsible for fixing someone who cannot be fixed. There are children born without the capacity for normal human connection, and no amount of patience therapy or unconditional love will change that fundamental reality. Get professional help, trust your instincts, protect your family, and don't let anyone convince you that love conquers all. Sometimes love needs to know when to let go. My name is Gertrude Miller, and this is the story I never wanted to tell. But if it saves even one family from walking the path I walked, then perhaps some good can come from all that darkness. The boy I tried to save is still out there in a place where he can't hurt anyone else. The family I failed to protect is scattered and scarred. And I'm here, an old woman with hard-earned wisdom, hoping that someone somewhere will listen to what I learned too late. Some monsters aren't made, some are born, and the most dangerous ones are the ones who look like children who need our love.